everyone, welcome to our webcast. Today we'll be doing a SandBlast customer webinar featuring SE2. My name is Polami Batra. I'm with the product marketing group at Checkpoint, and joining us today is Saul Schwartz, enterprise security engineer from SE2. And we're really excited to have Saul join us today and talk about his experience with SandBlast. But before chatting with him, I just wanted to give everyone sort of a brief overview of what SandBlast is. So last year in September, we announced SandBlast Zero-Day Protection. SandBlast is Checkpoint's zero-day protection solution. And what SandBlast is it's a solution that provides unprecedented real-time prevention against unknown malware, zero-day, and targeted attacks. And SandBlast is made up of two core technologies, one of them being sandboxing, or as we call it within Checkpoint, threat emulation, which is basically the concept of when a file is coming in from the browser or from your email, it'll be opened up in this safe virtual environment to see if the file is doing anything suspicious or something that it shouldn't be doing. And we're able to do sandboxing using our evasion-resistant sandbox. And the second component, the second core technology, is what we call threat extraction. And the concept of threat extraction is, when you have an incoming file, such as a Word document or PDF, what we're looking at is the active content within that file. So we're looking at any JavaScript, any macros, and we're stripping that file of these active contents, so things that could potentially be carrying malicious objects in them, and then providing a user almost instantaneously with a sanitized version of that file. So both these core technologies, they really complement each other, and they work well together, enable us to provide our customers with one of the highest malware catch rates, as well as proactive protection that can be deployed in full block mode. And briefly wanted to touch, we provide with SandBlast flexible deployment methods for customers based on their needs. So if a customer wants to deploy without adding any internal hardware to run their sandbox, they're able to do this using our SandBlast service. Or if you have more of more privacy regulations and you don't want your emails to be sent out, you can run SandBlast using a dedicated SandBlast appliance on premise. And the other cool part about SandBlast is, if a file is deemed safe, it's obviously returned to the user, but if something is found to be wrong in it, then we're sending that information into Threat Cloud, which is our intelligence database, and it's collecting all that information, and it's updating our antivirus and IPS and all our other protections with all this information. So I mentioned before that we announced SandBlast in September of 2015, and we started with our network solution at that point. And since then, we've really expanded this family, and now we provide SandBlast for endpoints, web browsers, cloud applications, as well as custom applications. So I just wanted to touch a little bit briefly on what SandBlast is for those of you who might not be very familiar with it. And now I really want to take the opportunity to talk to Saul. So Saul, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here and talk a little bit about SE2 and your security needs and how SandBlast played a part in it. So to begin with, Saul, could you tell us a little bit about SE2 and your role at SE2?
So SE2 is a business process outsourcer, specifically in the life insurance and annuities field. We essentially do a lot of the back office and processing for different life insurance and annuity companies. I've been with SE2 for close to 4 years now in the security role. And we're also doing a lot of call center front office support for these companies. So a wide variety of different business functions in the financial services industry.
All right, great. And when we think about security and why security is important and critical for SE2, what were some of the top pain points for you?
Well, security in our environment is very critical to our day-to-day business because we're handling or custodians of data for multiple different companies. So it's a multi-tenant environment. So we've got to ensure that the right protections and layers of defense are in place to ensure security. I think some of the problems that we were facing was that threats are evolving on a daily or more than daily basis, multiple times a day, and we weren't seeing the results we wanted to see from our competitors' product in the sandboxing environment. And we really wanted to find a solution that would not just rely on signature-based protection, and also be able to block threats in line and not just pull the information from a cloud or a feed and then make the decision from there.
Great. And were you specifically in some of the challenges that you were seeing? Were you specifically faced with malware that was unidentifiable or zero-day attacks? Were you seeing that pretty frequent in your systems?
It was more just known threats. Very few zero-day, but we did see some variants of signature-based attacks that would be considered zero-day.
Mm-hmm.
And those were obviously in our competitors' products impossible to do anything about. It was more of a alerting mechanism as to when the signature was developed. Then you already were infected at that point.
Right. So you wanted something more proactive, something that could catch it before it actually caused any damage.
That is correct.
And what kind of impact were you seeing within SE2 from some of these threats that were getting in and you were getting alerted about them?
So the impact to business was really from the user perspective. So when we get alerted that a user's endpoint was infected, it basically took them out of commission for 1 to 2 days while we analyzed what happened and then remediation of the threat or just flat out re-imaging the machine. And that was, I would say, fairly frequent. It was happening once, twice a week, and I wouldn't consider us a large shop by any means, but the solution that we had in place wasn't getting enough of those threats and blocking them at all.
And just to give everyone an idea, how large is the security team at SE2?
We have 2 engineers. When we implemented this solution, it was just me, so 1 person.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you were really looking for a solution that was more efficient and could help you do your job much faster and efficiently.
That's correct, definitely.
And so when you were on this journey to find the new solution, what were some of the specific criteria that you had in mind while looking for that correct solution for your environment?
Well, I wanted something that could handle inline traffic to and from the internet and not just be an alerting mechanism. I also wanted something that was real time. It didn't rely on a feed to make decisions on whether the file was clean or not. I also wanted to get a single pane of glass. When I came here, we were on multiple different vendors of different network security products, and it was difficult to troubleshoot where the infection ingressed on or where it was successful, and then if it was a false positive, where did it stop? So I was kind of tired of opening up 2 to 3, 4 different consoles and logging mechanisms to triage or do forensics, and having a single pane of glass was also a very important part of my decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So before you were solving this problem with SandBlast, were you basically using multiple vendors to kind of help you do, you know, detection as well as forensics and remediation?
That's correct. So it would, ingress on this particular IPS, and then ingress through the sandboxing solution, and then go through a different firewall, and then to our checkpoint gateway. So it was really difficult to kind of figure out what, follow the path of the infection or the malware. So definitely getting to that simple single pane of glass, like I've mentioned before, was kind of critical to me, because I didn't have the time to really focus on that, plus move forward with projects and our security program.
Right, absolutely. And then at what point did you come across Checkpoint, and how did you find out about SandBlast?
Well, it was before SandBlast. It was the threat emulation product, and I believe that's when we purchased the product. But it was really shortly prior to that I had read a couple white papers. Our Checkpoint representative discussed it with us and showed us. I think the simplicity was really what kind of made it the solution of choice for us. What didn't require hardly any configuration on our end, and I think the real benefit or the real selling point was we were able to demo it with almost no configuration, and then see what we were missing at that point, and then make a decision. Well, do we want to continue with this and purchase it and block these threats indefinitely, or do we want to continue looking at other solutions where we know this one's working correctly?
Yeah, and when you're talking specifically about Checkpoint in our solution, how was Checkpoint able to offer you that solution to the problem specifically with SandBlast, would you say?
So the solution to the problem was really the ability to block the threats in real time, where the competitors could not do that. They were relying on the feeds and the services that they provided to their appliance or their service, and I think that was the driving point to the solution. The other part that they were offering were the ability to dig down and see the forensic evidence or the attack within the log of the infections. So not only could you see this attack was blocked, but you could look at the results in the emulation environment of, for instance, if it was a Word document, you could see the screenshot of Word opening, and then what exactly it did, whether it be modify registry keys or reach out to command and control or botnets. And I think that ultimately that's what we were looking for, was not only just an alerting or a blocking mechanism, but the ability for us to see what was happening. And
okay. and then and then when you think about, you said you evaluated a couple of other solutions. At that point, were you were you doing kind of bake-offs between these two products and looking at how much each catches side by side, and how many different products were you evaluating at that point?
We evaluated two different products. One was the competitors that we had the product before. We got a larger appliance that was, feature parity to what SandBlast is offering.
Mhm.
The way we baked it off was used a number of different um, infected files and payloads that we acquired. And now, granted, we're not developers, so we weren't able to code our own threats or malware, but from a signature-based perspective, it was very simple.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the ease of setup, so the competitor's appliance was a lot more configuration and a lot more um, features that we weren't interested in at that point. Um, so it was just easier to get the the checkpoint solution up and running. Uh, and we, from the technical perspective, we just spanned what we were currently doing. We just created a span port, and that way we were able to see not only our tests but live production traffic filter through both tests. So that's really what I've seen demos of other products before, and they're doing demonstration traffic, but it's different when you're able to try it out on your own production traffic where you're familiar with the sources and destinations and what people are doing on a day-to-day basis to do business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is very, very important. And you actually segued into the next question that I had was, as far as the process of getting started with SandBlast, how easily were you able to implement the solution within your infrastructure, and what deployment option did you go with?
Sure. So we went with the SandBlast service. Uh, as I mentioned before, we demoed the product using the SandBlast service. So it was just 5 to 10 minutes of modifying our gateway and smart dashboard, and then creating a policy, and then installing the policy. And then I think probably the longest part was just installing the license key, the demo license key. So at that point, we were up and running. We were seeing our live production traffic, and we were able to make decisions on that point. And then as far as after the demo, we just cut a new license key, installed the license, and we left our existing demo platform there. So it was, I mean, all in all, probably half an hour. So
That's
to answer
that's
your question, very
fantastic.
very easily. No racking and stacking of an appliance, no configuration. Um, but even then, I can't imagine it taking very much time just based on building the policy. I mean, that wouldn't really change whether it was appliance or the service.
That's really fantastic to know that it was so easy for you to implement. Just moving, I think you've touched a lot about some of the solutions that you saw with SandBlast, such as real-time prevention. You saw more comprehensive visibility into the threats, and you were able to sort of consolidate everything into one management console. Um, but just as far as results, what would you say, before SandBlast, you were spending how much time on remediating and trying to catch these threats versus after SandBlast? If you could just give us some rough idea about it.
I would say 3 to 4 hours a week of my time um, remediation of threats prior to SandBlast, and then that's not counting, investigation or forensics, because sometimes, just didn't have the time to perform that.
Right.
Um, After SandBlast, it's difficult to say. Very very little time. Um, I don't see any threats pass through the emulation engine. I mean,
Mm.
and I think that's just part of the us moving up to the feature set of being able to block those threats in real time. Um, paid dividends.
Yeah, so because you have that real-time prevention technology now, you're not really having to remediate because you're not seeing threats come in.
Exactly. It's no longer an alerting mechanism.
Yeah, which is great news. I mean, this is what the product should be doing for you.
Yep.
And you know, as a small team, I think that's very important to pay attention to the prevention factor because it's saving you so much time, and you can take that time and spend it to other areas that you need to.
That's definitely correct, and that was the whole goal of bringing in the solution.
So that's fantastic. I mean, I just reiterating here, I think the things that you're seeing from SandBlast are detecting and blocking the zero-day threats, and it's offering you a much easier to deploy solution with full visibility into threats that are taking place in your network. And you know, I think it's safe to assume that it's reduced the number of infections in your network if you're not seeing any alerts coming through about threats like you were before. That means we're actually blocking things for you, which is very good. One question I had for you was, what is your favorite feature about SandBlast?
I think the ability, the way it integrates into Smart Log and then gives me the ability to deep dive into, I believe it's called the threat investigation portion of it, so I can see exactly what the threat would have done in our environment had it been whitelisted or allowed. I would say that's probably my favorite feature.
Okay. Would you say that's a feature that you wouldn't be able to live without anymore?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. Great.
Thank
you. Thanks, Saul. That was really fantastic to get an overview of your experience with SandBlast. You know, if anyone has any questions for Saul, this is the time. Please use that panel on the bottom right hand, and we can get some questions for Saul to know more about his experience with SandBlast. So Saul, one of the questions was, what kind of cost savings, as far as, you know, total cost of ownership and return on investment, what kind of cost savings did you see with the SandBlast solution?
Well, you know, I already touched on how much time it was saving me, and I'm not an expert in those types of calculations, but I'd say my time is pretty valuable. And the lowering the total cost of ownership of not having to maintain an appliance, and that is unique to the SandBlast service rather than having the appliance. That's definitely factored into our cost savings. And then just the cost of, you know, I mentioned before, losing a day or two of productivity from the user perspective.
Yeah.
You know, varies on their role, obviously, but definitely cost savings there.
No, absolutely. Time is very valuable, especially when you have a small team.
Exactly.
And we have a question coming in. Were there any issues with the user population adapting to SandBlast in the environment?
You know, I read, I guess, or I was warned that with the file emulation that it was going to with this having specifically with the SandBlast service and not the appliance, that there's going to be a delay. I haven't gotten any complaints. Me being a tech person, I have noticed, you know, maybe a second or two delay after I download a file for it to pass through the emulation engine. But we didn't feel the need to communicate to the user base that this is happening. So no, there hasn't been any issues with the user community with adapting the product. Ultimately, they're basically unaware it's there.
Yeah, and ultimately for us, that's the goal, to make it very transparent for the user.
Right.
And another question coming in here about manageability. How difficult has it been to manage it, or do you have someone else managing it?
I would say it has been not difficult at all. Like I kind of touched on before, it was, I hate to say set it and forget it, but we turned on the service on the gateway, and then made sure that the policy was set up correctly, and I haven't made any changes to the policy since we've implemented it. As far as scaling out, like our environment has grown by a lot in the past year, and I still haven't had the need to go back and modify the policy. There are some decision points that you need to make based on risk to your environment, whether you want to focus on high, low, medium confidence and
Right.
performance on the appliance if you do purchase the appliance. Using the service, though, that's kind of made it a little more simple for me to make those decisions.
Okay, awesome. And then how many other security products or solutions did SandBlast replace for you? Firewall, DNS, antivirus?
Well, it doesn't replace the traditional firewall or next generation firewall. It doesn't. It's not a captive DNS or service. I'd say it's really a complement to the antivirus service. I hesitate to say it would replace a traditional antivirus service based on signatures, but it really makes your entire suite of products more. I mean, it just complements everything. So I hesitate to say it would replace anything, but
Right.
Maybe in the future.
Yeah, and we tend to agree with you on that. We think of it like layers of protection, and you still need that protection from signature-based threats. So you need your antivirus and IPS still, but then you also need that extra layer from the unknown stuff, the stuff that doesn't have signatures.
Right. Correct.
And those were all the questions that we had for today. So again, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and talking to us about your experience with SandBlast.